Hello, everybody. Welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Such.
And my name is James.
James. We've had a full weekend of FA Cup quarterfinals. Quarterfinals. That's what I'm talking about, isn't it?
No,
round 16. Last 16. Sorry.
Yeah,
I was trying to
round.
think. Fifth round. Last 16, whatever it is. We've had that.
You'll get there. It's a good start, boss.
We're having the last 16 of the Champions League. First legs have now been completed, and we know what the quarterfinals for the FA Cup looks like, and we are figuring out what the quarterfinals for the Champions League might look like. And it's been a bit of a merit in the Champions League for the English teams so far. So yeah, we're going to get into chip talk today. It's time for some planning. Time for some planning. I thought, to be honest with you, after the FA Cup, this is looking all right. I really didn't expect the English teams to do as badly as they have in the Champions League. Not everybody's done badly, but you'd say that City are not likely to go through.
No, I mean, the only thing that's really
Chelsea
changed,
not likely to go through.
At the start of the week, there would have been three English teams projected to go through. City, Liverpool and Arsenal, and now it's two. It's Arsenal and Liverpool.
Yeah, you'd still back Liverpool to beat Galatasaray.
Of course.
Obviously, Newcastle now have to go away to Barcelona, not likely to, and both Chelsea and
we all know that
have a 3-goal deficit to make back, as do Tottenham.
As to Chelsea. We all know that Tottenham will win 4-0 next week.
Chelsea, City and Tottenham.
Tottenham will win 4-0 next week. You know that. I know that. Everyone knows that.
Who, Tottenham women's or Tottenham under 12s?
I'll have to check the fixtures. So actually, it's not changed that much. It changes a few things in terms of Manchester City. What's changed more, and we won this a couple of weeks ago, was the FA Cup draw was more likely than anything else to move the needle of something else, because I think even on Sunday night, it was like, well, projections are still the same as they've been since the start of January. What's really changed that now is obviously Manchester City and Liverpool drawing each other in the FA Cup quarterfinal. So the Cup quarterfinal draw.
They had to draw 2 of the 4 of Arsenal, City, Chelsea, Liverpool together. They couldn't have split them all. Well, it would have been too sus.
Why would it be sus?
Because they split them out, mate, and they heat the balls and whatever they do, but they purposefully fix it so that so it doesn't look. If you're going to try and steal money, James, don't steal all of it.
Stop.
So they had to put 2 against each other, which is fair play.
It's the old-fashioned way. Balls in a draw. There's no heated stuff here, except for that time Crystal Palace was in the Carabao Cup draw, and I told you they'd get a tough one. So the quarterfinal draw is Chelsea against Port Vale. Chelsea obviously will be very strong favourites.
Huge favourites, yeah.
Obviously, Port Vale, fair credit to them, knocked out Sunderland, having knocked out Bristol City last midweek as well. Manchester City against Liverpool. City will be favourites. It's at the Etihad. I think that would have been even tougher to call, obviously, if the game was at Anfield. But with City having home advantage, they will be projected to go through. Yep. Arsenal obviously will be strongly projected to go through. They travel to St Mary's against Southampton, conquerors of Fulham. That was a bad result for me, by the way, on my plan. There's someone who owns a couple of Fulham players and a Villa player in terms of game week 33. And so was your team beating Brentford, because I've got 3 of them and Bruno Fernandes. There's context and consequence to that for me personally for 33-34. West Ham now host Leeds. Similar to the City-Liverpool scenario, because you're at home, you will be projected.
Slight 55-45, 52-48, something like that, yeah.
The reality in short is this. We can strongly expect Chelsea and Arsenal to go through. Projections will be Manchester City and West Ham. Those fixtures could easily go the other way round. That said, I don't suppose anybody particularly thought that Port Vale would beat Sunderland at the weekend. Mm-hmm. And remember, the underdogs in these games don't necessarily have to win them. It goes to penalties. There's no replays. Don't even necessarily have to win. The immediate consequence to obviously Manchester City winning at Newcastle on Saturday night is that Manchester City will now almost certainly blank in game week 31. It's not impossible that they don't. Technically, they could play the rearranged fixture from 31 against Crystal Palace in 31 or 32 if both go out of Europe next week. Second leg's obviously next week. City have it all to do But if Palace win, game ain't going in 31 or 32 impossible. I would think under a circumstance where Crystal Palace were eliminated along with Manchester City, then there is every chance that that fixture will happen. I would say 32 would be more likely than 31, just from a perspective of time. Doesn't mean, by the way, that it will be either. It's just if it was to be one of those two, I'd say 32 is marginally more likely.
If they were going to try and put it into, if they were going to try and squeeze it into late in 31, then you're talking about what, 2 weeks notice it would be?
No, technically it's a little bit longer, isn't it? Probably
because of the international break.
Real life midweeks.
That's the reason why, had there been no international break, it would be impossible, because it's not fair to give fans that little notice. But because the international break, maybe.
Yeah, you've also got to remember that if 31 and 32 is available, so too is 34, 35, right? Everything technically is available. The projected FA Cup semi-finalists, to repeat, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester City, West Ham, as it stands. Teams who play in an FA Cup semi-final will have their fixture postponed from the weekend of game week 34. This does not mean, however, that those games cannot still take place in game week 34. One of our projections that we'll get onto is that one of those fixtures will remain in game week 34. It is highly, highly likely that for any game that is postponed that involves a club that is still in European competition after next week, that the fixture will be brought forward to game week 33. Why does it only have to be who gets through next week? Well, these games are going to be arranged before the quarterfinals happen. It's highly likely. They could, in theory, wait till... I mean, if they waited till the end of the second legs, which is the end of game week 32, you would be waiting for the midweek afterwards. Right. They're not gonna do that. Okay. Right. There are 4 confirmed fixtures for game week 34 as it stands. We'll come on to them in a little bit. There will be a minimum of 6 games. It is not impossible that all 10 fixtures happen in game week 34. That's exceptionally unlikely. We would probably currently project that there are 7 fixtures in game week 34. So the English clubs, as you said, Suj, are all at risk in the Champions League. What does that mean? In short, endless possibilities. I'd like to read you a tweet, Suj. This is from our friend JC at FPL Spaceman from Solio Analytics. And this tweet went out prior to Manchester City losing last night. So it was kind of towards the end of the games on Tuesday evening. He says, by my count, there are 3,468 possible unique blank/double game week fixture slates remaining. The likeliest permutation has 20% probability. So when we're saying these projections right now, and his might be slightly different to mine, by the way, we're saying there's about a 20% likelihood that this is correct. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah, just saying this is a projection and telling you this is what's going to happen. He says the 11 most likely account for 50% of the sample size. So that might be something like Liverpool eat Man City and just one thing flips, for example. The 66 most likely account for 75%, and there are 331 most likely to account for 90% of the potential possibilities. 468 possible unique blank double game week scenarios here. Do we understand that?
Well, there's a lot that can happen next week. I think next midweek set of fixtures is massive. Is absolutely massive. Should Arsenal go out to Leverkusen and obviously City, likely Madrid fixture back on, that's quite important because they play each other in that game week, right? So that's an easy fixture to chuck back in. Same is true for Chelsea, Liverpool, isn't it?
What's that? Sorry.
Are they playing? Isn't it? No, it's Everton, Liverpool. Sorry, it's
in 33. That
33 and so on.
The 33 weekend fixtures won't move. One might, because as we said a couple of weeks ago, the TV selections for April could be quite important. I stressed concern that Sky might put Burnley against Manchester City on a Friday night to try and block a midweek Manchester City rearrangement against Crystal Palace. They didn't do that, but they have put Crystal Palace against West Ham on the Monday night in game week 33, which potentially serves as the same purpose of potentially blocking Manchester City versus Crystal Palace going into game week 33. It also possibly blocks West Ham against Everton being brought forward from 34 to 33. That's why I think Sky put that in there. I'm sure, listen, with West Ham being towards the bottom of the table, and at that point, I think when it was announced Palace hadn't won at Tottenham, so Palace might have still been involved. It's a reasonable pick for TV selection. We're not questioning that. But the fact that it was put on a Monday night was done, I think, most consciously. So the Palace-West Ham fixture can move. There are several fixtures that have been picked in April which can move, determined to European movement of fixtures. It's Chelsea Man City, for example, in game week 32. In the event that they both went through and one plays on a Tuesday, that's going to get brought back towards the Saturday night. Yeah. Palace West Ham can move from the Monday night. And it said, the reason it said that it could move, and I presumably back to the Sunday, is they said that it was down to cup involvement and European competition involvement. I think that it will only probably move if Liverpool beat Manchester City in the FA Cup. Which might sound, what's that got to do with it? Well, I think if Liverpool beat Manchester City in the FA Cup, then there's every chance that Liverpool against Crystal Palace in 34 has to be brought forward to that midweek in 33. But you don't have to move it from Manchester City against Crystal Palace.
Is that reliant on Liverpool getting through in the Champions League?
Yeah. So I think
if they don't go through in the Champions League, then that is what you said there.
No,
irrelevant.
Not necessarily. So it only really needs Liverpool to beat Man City in the Cup quarterfinal and Aston Villa to beat Lille.
Okay.
So we're spinning here from Palace West Ham into Man City v Liverpool into Villa versus Lille. Why are Villa important in this? Right. Again, a reminder, the Europa League final was between the midweeks of 37 and 38. It's not after the season like the Conference League final and the Champions League final. It's in the midweek. So if Liverpool got to the FA Cup final, that weekend they're scheduled to play Aston Villa in 37. So if Villa in Europa League final, it can't move it backwards. It has to come forward to game week 36. And the chances of that all happening, Villa reaching the Europa League final and Liverpool reaching the FA Cup final, that is possible, but it's unlikely. But they have to, on the planning of fixtures, they have to leave that open.
Know that has to be able to come forward.
Have to leave that open.
Yeah.
So if Liverpool were to progress in Europe, and we're projecting that they do, and again, they'd only need to beat Galatasaray, then there's no weeks potentially available for Liverpool against Crystal Palace other than game week 33. And again, Palace are in Europe. So it doesn't even need Liverpool to go through. It just needs Palace to go through. It needs one or the other to go through. That fixture can't move to a scheduled European week. 31, 32, 34 or 35. If either of those teams are still in European competition.
So they wouldn't move Villa and Liverpool just to the midweek before the FA Cup final, you don't think?
They'd have to.
Oh, so 36.
Yeah, under the event.
Only midweek. Yeah, I see it. Okay.
Under the event that they both got to their respective finals, it would have to be. This is the exact scenario we spoke about with Villa and Tottenham last season, because remember, Villa were in an FA Cup semi-final and obviously Tottenham was still in Europa League at the time. Obviously, not just at the time, we got all the way. This doesn't apply, it's not applicable to Nottingham Forest scenario, by the way, because Nottingham Forest are scheduled to play Manchester United at Old Trafford in game week 37. Those two teams are both out of the FA Cup, so therefore that fixture won't move. So this is only applicable to an Aston Villa scenario. It's not applicable to Nottingham Forest, even if Forest end up going quite far. And I believe the two sides, Forest and Villa, could meet in the semi-finals, actually.
So with Crystal Palace, Liverpool, tell me why they wouldn't move Liverpool Villa to the midweek of 33, like bringing it really far forward, and leave Liverpool Palace should Liverpool go through to the cup.
But not going to move a fixture that we don't know has to be moved.
Okay, so they'll move the Palace game, get that out of the way, and Villa will either be on the weekend because they're all out of everything, or Liverpool don't make the final, and or midweek earlier.
I would say it's not impossible that under a scenario where if Liverpool were out of Europe, Villa are still in Europe, and Liverpool are in the FA Cup, I don't think it's impossible that they made a provisional announcement that Villa Liverpool could get In fact, can't Villa Liverpool can't even come forward to 35 if Villa. It's the only week, literally. So
Yeah, 36. I can see it in front of me on the planner. 36 is the only week. So so that's fine. They can play Villa on the Wednesday. We'll have a clear midweek. We'll even rest half our team because we play Arsenal in 36. We'll play a B team. So we'll have 2 weeks rest before the FA Cup final. And then we'll go and get revenge for 2005.
You're assuming you're going to be that safe from relegation, yeah?
Yeah. Come on. Have you watched your team? You did. You went all the way to Madrid for that pleasure. Right, okay. So there's no chance of Villa, Liverpool coming all the way forward.
Nah.
So Palace, Liverpool, under that circumstance, has to be in 33, which explains your point why Palace City can't be in 33, because Palace Liverpool has to be in 33.
So what I'm saying is,
if Liverpool Palace is in 33, it's because Liverpool have got to the semis of the FA Cup, which means City haven't. So they'll find somewhere for City and Palace. And obviously, as it stands, they're pretty likely to be out of the Champions League as well.
the priority fixture, this is the easiest way to think about it. The priority fixture in rescheduling possibilities is Aston Villa against Liverpool, because there is a scenario where it can only move to one place.
Yeah. So when you say it's a priority, I mean, it's pretty, it's black and white. There's no like ifs and buts, might be maybes.
My point
That's
being
the only
is
time.
They couldn't put City Palace in 33 if Liverpool were still in.
I get it. They have to leave 36 free for these guys.
Correct.
Yeah.
There is a scenario where Liverpool beat Manchester City in the FA Cup and City and Palace still goes into 33 rather than Liverpool v Palace. But for that scenario to happen, Liverpool and Palace have both got to go out of Europe in the next 8 days.
Okay.
That's the only way that happens.
Okay.
Otherwise, you cannot be holding Liverpool v Palace for a European week if either of them continues in Europe. So your consequence of possibilities and probabilities is Villa-Liverpool is the priority fixture, even though it may not need to be moved. You need to hold that. Then it's Liverpool-Palace. So City-Palace as a consequence becomes less important. Because also City-Palace can just go into 36 if it has to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Under a scenario where Villa-Liverpool does happen in 36, by the way, and I only think it happens under that circumstance where Liverpool made an FA Cup final and Villa made a Europa League final, it's not impossible that they brought another fixture forward. So I'll give you an example. Let's say the FA Cup final is Arsenal against Liverpool. Then out of fairness to Liverpool, ahead of the FA Cup final, they may also bring, say, Arsenal's fixture with Burnley forward to the midweek of 36.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you another example. Let's say West Ham make the FA Cup final. They could bring our away fixture against Newcastle forward to the midweek of 36. And I much prefer my example to yours.
If it helps, I prefer your example as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. It means Arsenal won't be on the quadruple.
The reason for flagging that is it's very, very unlikely, but it's not impossible that game week 36 has more fixtures than game week 33. Mm-hmm. Because under that scenario, let's use Liverpool West Ham to make you feel better, Suj. Under a scenario where Liverpool West Ham is the FA Cup final and Aston Villa in Europa League final, we may have a circumstance, and actually probably only needs Villa in Europa League semi-finals, by the way. Then we could have Liverpool's fixture against Villa in 36. We could have Newcastle against West Ham in 36. And by consequence of Liverpool Palace having to be in 33, you might get City v Palace in 36 as well.
Right.
It's not impossible. Very, very unlikely. My belief, by the way, nothing got brought forward to game week 36 last season. And Sky have the playoffs. So they have coverage of some football matches that they'll want exposure to. If they show a Premier League game there, they'll be happy for it to clash. But they still have coverage of football during that free midweek. They weren't bothered about it last year. I don't think they'll be bothered about it this year. The Premier League stated last year that they wanted teams to have a free midweek ahead of the FA Cup final. This Villa-Liverpool scenario would give us a scenario like Villa-Tottenham last year if it had to happen, where it would be impossible to avoid.
Okay.
Otherwise, we probably shouldn't expect any fixture to be brought forward from 37 to 36. So, just to explain the current projections. So, on Manchester City versus Liverpool, as I guess one of the harder ones to call in terms of FA Cup quarterfinals, if City win, then we should likely expect their 34 fixture with Burnley to be brought forward to game week 33. It could be the Crystal Palace fixture instead, if they're prepared to move Crystal Palace versus West Ham fixture to accommodate it. I don't think they necessarily will be. It might be an unlikely scenario here where Arsenal lost to Southampton, where they might force it. But I don't think they'd be that bothered to bring it forward. Sky will be thinking we can have City v Palace at a different time. City Burnley goes into 33. That's the most likely. It gets brought forward from 34 to 33.
So that's Arsenal at home, Burnley away as a double game week for City.
Correct. If Liverpool win, as discussed, the fixture with Crystal Palace essentially has to be brought forward to game week 33 as long as one of those two teams make it through in Europe in the next 8 days. And
only one of those two teams needs to make it through.
Correct.
Obviously, we're recording Thursday. We don't know how Villa are going to get on yet.
It's Palace. Palace are developing. Palace are playing AEK Larnaca. They lost to them in the group stage at home.
Right.
But
we'd expect them to go through.
Correct. And I still expect Liverpool to turn it around next week as well.
So Liverpool's double would be Everton away and Palace at home. Both tough fixtures, but yeah.
Correct. It'd be one of the better looking doubles, by the way.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
As we'll come on to. So Chelsea have Port Vale at home. Now, obviously, it's highly likely Chelsea will go through. Their fixture at Brighton will likely be brought forward from 34 to 33 if they win. Now, obviously, their goals behind against PSG and looking at elimination, there is no guarantee that it will come forward. I think it will, and I'll explain why a little bit later. Arsenal go to Southampton. Their fixture against Newcastle will be brought forward from 34 to 33 if either of those teams, Arsenal or Newcastle, progress in the Champions League next week. We obviously still expect Arsenal to go through.
Yeah.
West Ham Leeds is kind of the hardest permutation to predict, not just because of the matchup, two perhaps evenly matched sides, but also what will happen to the rearranged fixture. As said, I think West Ham versus Everton in 34 would perhaps only likely come forward to 33 in the event that the Palace West Ham Monday Night Football is moved. There is a scenario here where they could make West Ham play Monday, Thursday, and then FA Cup semi-final on a Sunday. I highly doubt that they're going to do that when they wouldn't have to do it. So for West Ham to double with Everton in 33, it may require West Ham and Liverpool both to win in the FA Cup. Why and Liverpool? Because we're saying Liverpool.
Then Palace game has to move.
You've got it
and then West Ham can be slotted in. Okay, that makes sense. The other thing though with that West Ham Leeds game, because there's no European involvement, and whilst it's still tight at the bottom of the table, it's a reasonably attractive standalone fixture for Sky to chuck on in a midweek or what have you. They won't have any issues with that. So they're quite fancy a little bit of that later in the season when there's maybe the European semis going on. Especially
I'm sure this is why Sky put Palace West Ham on the Monday night. We're thinking we hope this possibility turns out.
Yeah.
Right? I'd literally mentioned on this podcast a couple of weeks ago when we last did Chip Strategy about the possibility of them doing something like this with Brentford versus Fulham to do similar things. Now, obviously, you've just knocked Brentford out. They've gone the other route and it's worked out for them. The game could stay in 34, even in the event that West Ham and Liverpool both did win, by the way. 35 is obviously a possibility. It doesn't necessarily stay in 34. Again, no European involvements for West Ham against Everton. I would say there's every chance it stays in 34 if Sky do something further cheeky. Like, for example, if they decide they want Brentford versus West Ham on Friday night in 35, it's going to block 35, isn't it? That sort of eventuality would force it into 34.
Just if we played on the Friday for game week 35, why would that block 35? Could you do the Friday and then the following week, Tuesday or Wednesday?
Or sorry, it would block 34 and then be the midweek afterwards in 35.
Yeah. So the 35 would become a double game week.
Yeah. So West Ham Monday night in 33, Friday night in 35, but that blocks the 34 and 33 midweek.
Completely. Yeah.
So maybe then it goes into the 35 midweek. Yes. Correct.
Okay.
Obviously, Leeds could definitely conceivably beat West Ham, right? It's kind of a 60-40 game.
Not even that. Closer than that, I
All
would
right,
say.
55-45. Fine. I'll give you the home advantage, Serge.
Cheers.
Leeds are scheduled to play Bournemouth in game week 34. So obviously, if Leeds win, that fixture will be off on the weekend. Whether that's forward to 33, stays in midweek or 34, or moves back to 35 is difficult to say. In the unlikely scenario where Chelsea lost to Port Vale, I think it might come forward. That is down to when games can be put on TV. I'll come back onto that. The Champions League dates, semi-final dates, and the game week 35 TV picks could yet have an influence on rescheduling. I.e., we could be sitting here this time next week, how we project Europe to happen unfolds in the second legs, and yet we might have selections in 35, like I just referenced for Brentford West Ham, that makes us go, actually, I now think West Ham Everton would go into 35 rather than 34 under that scenario. Just a timeline for you of what happens next. So game week 30, obviously at the weekend. Second legs in Europe next week. The dates for UEFA's quarterfinals likely to be confirmed around the afternoon next Friday. Remember, next Friday is the deadline for game week 31. The game week 35 TV picks are scheduled to be picked on Wednesday, the 25th of March. That is 13 days from now. So before the FA Cup quarterfinals. We've then got the international breaks. We are also scheduled to have the game week 36 TV picks on April the 1st. That's the midweek before the FA Cup quarterfinals over the 4th and the 5th. The FA Cup semi-final dates are then likely to be confirmed quite quickly following the obviously eventuality of the quarterfinals. It's not a huge turnaround, right? From the FA Cup quarterfinals being played to the weekend of the semi-finals is 3 weeks. It will probably be quite obvious by this point if Chelsea win, as an example, in a quarterfinal, their semi-final might have to be on a Saturday because they've got a Tuesday game in the Champions League. Probably Arsenal would be a better example considering what's happened in Europe at the moment. Maybe Liverpool will be.
Yep.
Confirmation of what game week 33 will look like is a near certainty pre the 32 deadline. Remember,
Okay.
From the midweek of what would be 31 to the midweek of 33 in real life, it's 2 weeks. These games are going to be rearranged at around about 2.5 weeks notice. They're not going to piss this one up the wall and let it go on long.
We may have pre-announcements, or you don't think so?
That's
Ifs and buts.
Not at this stage because the quarterfinals will be done. There could be something that says, under the eventuality that Liverpool lost their Champions League quarterfinal, Liverpool v Palace will be played on this date in the midweek of 34. If they win, it's on this date in the midweek of 33. Can't rule that sort of thing out, but I think that's quite unlikely. I think it will be fairly obvious at this point what's likely to happen, particularly for the teams obviously in European competition. West Ham, Everton, or Bournemouth v Leeds, as an example, might be less likely. So we should have the information for game week 33 prior to the game week 32 deadline. The game week 32 deadline is a Friday. West Ham play Wolves that night.
We do.
So don't rule out the possibility of getting information on the Friday afternoon and the deadline being the Friday night. That is a possibility. Of all the bits of advice that I'll give on this podcast, this is the biggest bit. For those intending to wildcard in 32 and bench boost in 33, I strongly recommend you wait until the FA Cup quarterfinals are done. Strongly.
And that goes against normal advice would be if
Yeah.
you're wildcarding 32, as soon as the 31 deadline is passed, pull the trigger, hit the button. In this situation, you're saying don't.
There are 3 weeks from the game week 31 deadline to the game week 32 deadline. Ordinarily, activate, take your price increases, etc. And obviously plan away for the next 3 weeks. But you can't plan properly until the second weekend of those 3 weeks is done.
Okay.
And if shit goes wrong, what happens? Imagine this as a scenario. This is incredibly unlikely, but not something that is impossible. Imagine you activate that wild card ahead of game week 32 to prep to bench boost in game week 33, and then Port Vale and Southampton win. right, you might be looking at a scenario in game week 33 under that unlikely probability that you have something just like Burnley against Man City as a double, and that's it.
Or and not Liverpool Palace.
Liverpool Palace, Man City v Palace,
Yeah.
whatever. But it might generally just be one fixture because, as well, under the circumstance that West Ham also won along with Port Vale Southampton, we're saying there's no reason to force moving Palace against West Ham. You could literally just have one game. One game. Now, that's very unlikely, but what are you going to do under that circumstance?
Well,
it might be bench boost 33 is still like the right thing for you individually. That people will have different teams, and obviously you're going to wild card into something. Ultimately, you're then going to wild card into 3 Burnley players if they play Manchester City.
yeah,
That's
it
the
doesn't
only
make.
double.
Yeah. Yep.
The Bravka, Worrell, Hannibal. There you go. You can have that information for free as it stands, right? So that's my strongest advice to people. If you want to do that strategy, it's fine to wildcard 32 and bench boost 33. But my strong advice to people is don't activate the wildcard. It's not going to be worth it for the little small fractions of price changes that may or may not happen, because the first night or two will be volatile, right? It's a Friday night deadline. People are going to steam into selling City and Arsenal players in terms of how the market will move because they're not playing, right? Also, Crystal Palace and who are Arsenal were scheduled to play Wolves. We don't have a lot of that, right? So you know that Friday night and then Saturday, there'll be some price changes, right? Then it's going to be dead for 2 weeks.
If you had rolled up 3 or 4 transfers and there was 1 or 2 players that you really knew you wanted to get
them.
Just get them. And then if you hit the button, you hit the button. And if you don't hit the button,
yeah,
so be it.
But even then, let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say you want to buy Brian Bumo for 32. You're like, no matter what happens here, I'm going to want to buy him because Manchester United against Leeds. This is a bad example because United can't double in 33. But under that circumstance, let's say you were going to buy him for Semenyo. You just buy him in 31 anyway because he's got a fixture in 31 and Semenyo highly likely doesn't, right? Bad example. Let's say you want to buy, maybe Anthony Gordon's a better example of that, right? Sunderland at home, fixture 32, currently projected to double. Under that circumstance, what are you buying Anthony Gordon for? Like the day after the deadline? Oh, because his price is going to go up. Didn't you want him for Sunderland at home? Most examples will be like that.
Consider it maybe be a little bit earlier.
Ones that might not be. Oh, I'm desperate to get a Brighton player for Burnley away. Wait. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
We can be more confident, in essence, of what will happen with teams obviously still in European competition. Examples like West Ham, Everton, Bournemouth v Leeds are more difficult to say. I think we need to remember what happened last season because that's all we have to go on. Last season was the first under this new UEFA blanket ruling in terms of the change of structures of competition, and also the first time we had fixtures we knew were going to have to be brought forward from FA Cup semi-final. Commonly, games that get postponed take place later. That's how it normally works.
That's what postpone means, isn't it? It's not preponed.
Correctly, yeah. It's not bring forward. So last year, just want to remind you what happened. So Newcastle versus Crystal Palace went into game week 32. That was postponed because of the Carabao Cup final, Newcastle's involvement in that. Now, they weren't projected they weren't given the provisional announcement that their fixture would come forward. That happened in the 3 other ties. In the same way we saw obviously happen with Wolves Arsenal this year. It's like there might be a backlog problem of fixtures. If Arsenal get to the final, we're going to bring this fixture forward. They said they'd do the same with Everton Chelsea, if I remember correctly.
Okay. They did that with Liverpool last year, didn't they?
Yes. Yeah. So Liverpool ended up playing Aston Villa earlier is what happened. The Newcastle Palace fixture didn't come forward. It ended up going into game week 32. And the reason it was announced for game week 32 is because there was a backlog problem potentially happening with Crystal Palace. Because Crystal Palace were obviously still in the FA Cup and their FA Cup semi-final weekend was scheduled to play Arsenal. That fixture was brought forward to game week 33. So we got to a position where Newcastle Palace couldn't go into obviously 33 because we knew an example where Arsenal and Palace would have to get brought forward into that week. And with Palace still in the FA Cup, I think they were getting a bit nervous of, they might have to play right before the FA Cup final. Do you know what? We're going to shove it into 32. That's what they decided to do. So I think a lot of people are of the thinking that if City and Palace becomes available for that week, it will go in there in the same way Newcastle Palace did last year. But the difference this year is neither will be in the FA Cup under that sort of circumstance, right?
Okay.
If say City lost, let's say that City lose to Liverpool. Last year, because Palace were in the cup competition still and they were scheduled to play Arsenal, it was like, oh, there's a potential problem here. If both are out of Europe, it's not a problem. It doesn't mean it won't go into 32. Two fixtures came forward from 34 to 33. Arsenal Palace, as mentioned, and City Villa was the other. Now, they both got to the semi-final, so we only had 3 fixtures moved from that weekend. The other, Forest versus Brentford, went to 34. The reason it went to 34 rather than being brought forward was, essentially, Sky did the same trick that they've done here with Palace West Ham. They blocked it. They put Tottenham versus Forest on the Monday night, and it blocked Forest v Brentford being brought forward. It made more sense for it to be played later. They also blocked the week afterwards as well by putting Palace and Forest on a Monday night.
Right.
So it was straightforward that it was going to go into that week of 34 because Forest then had 4 days either side of their FA Cup semi-final and their next league fixture. The other movements were Palace v Wolves and City v Bournemouth. Because of Palace and City's involvement in the FA Cup final, they went to the Tuesday afterwards. There's no reason to think that sort of thing wouldn't happen again. The Villa-Liverpool scenario can obviously cause something where it comes forward earlier. The current projections for game week 33 are Arsenal against Manchester City away and Newcastle at home, Brighton away to Tottenham and at home to Chelsea, Burnley away to Nottingham Forest at home to Manchester City, Chelsea at home to Manchester United away to Brighton, Manchester City at home to Arsenal and away to Burnley, Newcastle at home to Bournemouth and away to Arsenal.
And from those projections that you just mentioned, it leaves, by my understanding, 2 unarranged fixtures, which would be Manchester City versus Palace and West Ham v Everton.
Correct.
Okay.
The logic on those projections, just to explain. So we all think Arsenal will still go through in Europe next week. So under that eventuality, if they beat Leverkusen and they beat Southampton, their fixture with Newcastle has got to be brought forward to 33. It's quite straightforward. Even if Manchester City go out of Europe, Palace are projected to go through. Okay, that's the current projection, that City will go out, but Palace will go through in Europe. I think that the Premier League would want to put City versus Palace into 35 if Palace went out of the Conference League at the quarterfinal stage rather than game week 36. So it still makes sense to bring City against Burnley forward and stop Arsenal from having 2 games more. So imagine this as a scenario, right? Let's say Arsenal Newcastle comes forward and then we're moving City Burnley back to 34 or 35 because they're not in Europe. Would then Arsenal play 2 games more than Man City?
It's skew if. I get that. It's not ideal
so
for the product.
I don't think that they're going to want to do that. Chelsea are obviously now projected to go out of Europe anyway, and they would have been prior to this midweek. PSG would have been favourites. I still think their fixture against Brighton is likely to be brought forward. The reason for that being is the Tuesday night in game week 33 would be available for that fixture. And possibly the only fixture would be available for that night. So remember in 33, City and Arsenal was on the Sunday. So if they have to play in 34, they're obviously playing on the Wednesday. Small chance Thursday. Small chance. I don't think 3 days before someone's going to have to do it. One of those 2 teams, unless they play each other.
Then they'd have to move their 34 fixture if they were going to play on the Thursday and 33. Because Arsenal playing on the Saturday against Newcastle, you wouldn't do Thursday, Saturday.
But we presume when Arsenal Newcastle would now be on the Wednesday, wouldn't it? And it's FA Cup semi-final possibly on the Saturday. One of those 2 teams, Arsenal or Manchester City, there's every chance they will cop Sunday against each other, Wednesday in the league, Saturday FA Cup semi-final.
Okay.
Remember, it's European fixtures the midweek afterwards. So in Arsenal's case, it could be City Sunday, Newcastle Wednesday, Cup semi against, say, Chelsea on the Saturday, trip to Bodo on the Tuesday.
Right.
Fun. As you are. So I think Brighton Chelsea will still probably come forward because then Sky can show it on a Tuesday night. And remember, it's a free midweek. That's Sky's opportunity for exposure to the Premier League, not in competition with others. Yes, I do think that in some circumstances they want to try and compete with the Champions League coverage, but there's no point in having an empty space where they can show games. Technically, as it stands, without any other movement of fixtures, Bournemouth versus Leeds, if Leeds beat yourselves, Suj, could also be brought forward to the Tuesday night. And that's why I said, I think if Chelsea lost to Port Vale, that would make me think if Leeds won, that Bournemouth Leeds would come forward. If Chelsea win, similar. There isn't really a need to bring it forward, though I think it would be more likely to come forward than West Ham Everton is at this moment. So I think Sky will want a Tuesday game. They might have to show both Arsenal and Manchester City or Liverpool on Wednesday.
Right.
But I think they want a Tuesday game. Brighton play 5:30 on the Saturday. Chelsea play 8 o'clock on the Saturday. Brighton versus Chelsea can take place on the Tuesday in the midweek. So what's interesting about this, and this is a big consequence to those who want to bench boost, of the 6 teams currently projected to double in game week 33, only Newcastle would have a 4-day turnaround. So Newcastle would have Bournemouth at home on the Saturday and then Arsenal away, presumably on the Wednesday. The 5 other teams would likely all have a 3-day turnaround between their weekend and their midweek fixtures in 33. That also applies to any...
What about Chelsea? If Chelsea were Saturday, Wednesday?
But we're saying to bring that fixture forward so TV shows it on the Tuesday.
Okay, but they don't have to. They could play it on the Wednesday.
They will.
Okay.
I'm telling you they will. If they bring Brighton Chelsea forward, it'll be on the Tuesday night.
Okay.
They ain't going to give a shit about the rest. They're going to go, well, we want a game on the telly on the Tuesday night. They're not going to put 3 games on a Wednesday.
They're going to have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, a day off on Thursday, then a Friday night game.
Mm-hmm.
So literally you've got Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and not Thursday, sorry, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday again. So you've got almost, I do the maths, 10 days, nine days of football in 10 days on Sky/TNT.
Brighton Chelsea, if it gets brought forward, will be a Tuesday night. I'm near certain of it.
Okay.
Bournemouth Leeds could also be a Tuesday night, but as said, I think primarily on the unlikely event where Chelsea lost to Port Vale. So what we're actually saying is, even if the projections here change, for Bournemouth, Palace, Everton, Leeds, Liverpool, or West Ham, if any of them double in 33, they're also likely to have a 3-day turnaround between their games. Every team, except Newcastle. So go and get your treble Newcastle for Arsenal away in the second part of the double. Yay. Game week 34 has 4 fixtures confirmed. Fulham versus Aston Villa, Manchester United versus Brentford, Sunderland versus Nottingham Forest, and Wolves versus Tottenham. Of those 8 teams, only Aston Villa and Tottenham can in theory double still this season. The 6 others will not, unless there is something unforeseen, weather or whatever.
Yep.
There are 3 other fixtures currently projected for game week 34. Bournemouth versus Leeds, Liverpool versus Crystal Palace, and West Ham versus Everton. City versus Palace. Whilst one is in Europe, the only availability are game weeks 33, 36 and 37. We are saying that there is a forced scenario, however, where Liverpool Palace might take that 33 slot. 33 is not possible for Manchester City versus Crystal Palace. Essentially, if Liverpool beat Galatasaray and City, and if Aston Villa beat Lille, that's Aston Villa's opponents.
And it's either or. It's not both. It's either or.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as something is in Europe there, it's blocking European weeks, basically.
Okay.
Here's an example for you, something to think about. What might an ideal game week 33 team look like if the 6 projected teams double? You can disagree with these selections. Some of you might have more money in the bank than what I've got, and some of you may have less. This has 0.2 million in the bank. I'm going to
Probably everyone's got more money than you, mate, because you waste all your money on going around Europe to see Tottenham.
I'm pretty sure my FPL squad value has a lot more than yours, sir. Shout out David Hunter because he's got the same problem. Right, so bus team for game week 33. This is a scenario given to you. Bart for Bruggen, Jurian Timber and Gabriel, double Arsenal defence. Trevor Chalobah, Nico O'Reilly, Antoine Semenyo, Declan Rice, Enzo Fernandez. Up front, Erling Haaland, João Pedro, Danny Welbeck. Your bench boost, Martin Dubravka, Bruno Fernandes, single game week fixture away to Chelsea, Malik Chow, and Mats Vifa. Looking good, this, isn't it? Now listen, Bruno Fernandes on a bench boost. That's great. Goalkeeper, defender, and a midfield enabler who's quite good for DEFCONs. Do I think that would hit the projected 16 points that I always say is the mythical target? Yeah, I think it probably does. It's unlikely to go mad, though, isn't it?
Mm.
You wouldn't think.
Could do
it. I mean, if Bruno scored
excitement.
at Chelsea, there's every chance he's a double point return, isn't he? Right?
Yeah, there's that can always happen. I'd say it was good for like 10 to 12 points, that bench, hopefully. Yeah. And then anything above that is a bonus.
What I did, for context in terms of putting this team together, and again, no one has to make this decision now, was I thought put the best three City assets in. Haaland, Semenyo, O'Reilly. Maybe for a double, you'd prefer Mark Gay. Or you could pick another offensive one. Maybe Marmoush is getting more minutes by then. Double Arsenal defence given. Bukayo Saka not worth the money over Declan Rice. Couldn't afford it anyway. Similarly, that's why Enzo Fernandez over Cole Palmer. João Pedro has to go in here. Trevor Chalobah as a defensive one. For Bruggen, Dubravka as keepers, because you can't pick the Newcastle one at the moment. Can't pick Ramsdale or Pope. If you were trying to make that decision now, yes, Ramsdale is number one at the moment. But could it change again? Who knows? It's a potential real big forward problem under these projections because the third forward I've put in as said is Danny Welbeck.
Yeah.
Right. Your alternatives are can't pick Voltemade or Visser. Gyökeres, Havertz. I don't know under that circumstance if you're having the best Arsenal anyway. It's like it's forced. João Pedro and Haaland become givens. You want to pick Zian Fleming? So you're so short forwards. Imagine a scenario here where Welbeck was injured. You'd be forced into picking one of the Arsenal forwards, I think. Or you go with like Fleming. I don't think you pick Voltemade or Visser.
No. I get it. I get what you've done there.
Now, under a circumstance where we had West Ham and Everton come forward,
Jared Bowen and whatever.
Yeah. Tiano Barry might be some people's preferences, but Bournemouth Leeds, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, right? You know, even if by putting Welbeck in this team, he's probably not starting both games. The good news is the first game's Tottenham, so it might be all right. So the reason to put that together is to consider 1 week earlier. So what might that team look like at point of wild card to then bench boost? This is the same 15. And it now becomes clear why I've left Bruno Fernandes in here. You could, of course, should you want to, in game week 33, take Bruno Fernandes out and punt Anthony Gordon or something, Mitoma, whatever you wanted, right? But this would be sort of what it looks like. Now, I don't think it looks terrible for 32.
The biggest problem is obviously the City-Chelsea fixture, right? Where you're pitting them against each other.
Correct.
But when people can see the team on screen, you've done it cleverly where offensive against offensive, less of an issue as opposed to offensive
the two defensive players.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to. I mean, in essence, if Nico O'Reilly was playing the 10 position, then there's every chance to say you'd still put him in, and he's in for offensive reasons, like we sort of think with a Daniel Munoz, for example. But yes, I've busted with O'Reilly, Chalobah, Vifa, and Dubravka on the bench. Verbruggen away to Burnley and Welbeck away to Burnley. That's all right. The treble Arsenal, Timber, Gabriel, Rice at home to Bournemouth. The City-Chelsea players, Fernandes, João Pedro, Semenyo, Haaland playing against each other. And very importantly, Bruno Fernandes at home to Leeds. Because I think on the face of it right now, Bruno Fernandes looks the best captain in game week 32. And that's why it's important. I've stressed concerns about people wildcarding in 32 and taking him out because, I've got to have the perfect team in 33. I'd probably just rather have him as a single away to Chelsea rather than force a doubler in, right? You're going to lose the value on him potentially for the run-in as well. Be a wild card in, right? This is your team. You're gonna buy him back in 35. So I think roughly this has got Malik Chow in the team away to Crystal Palace. I think roughly based on current projections, it will look something like this with some differences, but I think double Arsenal defence would be popular. Haaland and João Pedro would be auto picks. Absolutely auto picks. Because there just aren't enough forwards to go round based on the current teams that would be projected to double. What might a game week 34 free hit team look like? Because some people will wildcard to 32, bench boost 33, and then maybe free hit 34.
Yep.
So put this together. I think you would have serious want to get Manchester United and Liverpool assets. Probably three of both.
Yeah. So your free hit draft that's on screen now has everybody's got a home fixture in the starting 11.
Yeah. So treble United, I've put along with Fernandes, Bumo, and Sesko. Again, forwards might be a bit short here, believe it or not. Treble Liverpool, Van Dijk, Salah, Ekitike. Obviously, look, Isak could be back by this point. Might make Ekitike a dangerous pick. Double Bournemouth, Senesi, Tavernier. Jared Bowen as your third forward. Double Sunderland defence, Rose Ballard at home to Forest maybe. On the bench, just highlight a couple of others. Jose Sarr, Rodrigo Gomez, because I don't want you to forget that Wolves are also at home to Tottenham. James Hill, perfect cover on the bench, home to Leeds. Harry Wilson is at home to Villa if you fancied that over Tavernier or a different player in midfield. So I think under the current projections, Liverpool, Manchester United would be heavily favoured in game week 34. And I think, concentration of Sunderland, Bournemouth, West Ham gives you an opportunity to maybe invest in a few teams there might not be too much investment in. Bearing in mind as well, for Bournemouth, obviously it's going to look rough before this. So if this is Bournemouth's lay of the land and it's playing in 34, it's Newcastle away 33 and Arsenal away 32. You might be binning their assets and then coming back to them for this, for example. If you prefer Calvert-Lewin's, Leeds players or Tottenham players at Wolves, that's fine. Deal with that when it comes round. But I certainly think it'd be a high concentration of Manchester United, Liverpool. There's something really interesting about that, by the way. They play each other in game week 35.
Mm-hmm.
If you run through the 34, you're going to want United Liverpool players. And you're going to end up with the same consequence that we've warned about Chelsea Manchester City assets in 32. Or I want to wildcard into 6 of their players, but they're playing each other. You may end up on a circumstance here where, say, you wildcard in 34. Because for those who've used free hit, it might be the way out. Have to move to 33. Wildcard 34. Oh shit, I've now got 6 Manchester United and Liverpool players playing each other in 35.
At Anfield, yeah.
It's at Old Trafford.
Oh, sorry, it's at Old Trafford it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Something to be wary of.
Okay.
I want to show you this. This is from my planner. This is the final 4 weeks of the season, so the 4 game weeks in May. And the first thing you'll notice here is currently, yes, Manchester City, Crystal Palace projected to double in 36. That's the current projection as it stands. And despite that projection, Crystal Palace still sit bottom of that ticker, by the way, of all 20 teams, even with the additional fixture, right? Their run at the end of the season isn't great. That said, as mentioned a few weeks ago, I think everybody between game week 35 and 38 has at least one good fixture. Yep. It's just consequence of Palace would have City and Arsenal over that period. And fixtures against Bournemouth, Everton, Brentford are not easy. They're all top half at the moment. Palace may also, remember, be completely distracted by the Conference League over this period. It's worth remembering. So you'll notice City on this table. I want to pose a question to you, Serge, in terms of what you notice about these tables. And these teams are ranked based on my own FDR. It's different to the Premier Leagues and others. This is my own one. It's ranking teams from top is the best fixtures to Palace at the bottom worst. Leeds are top on this ticker. And it's Arsenal. Correct. Then Manchester City. Man City still sit quite well on this, by the way, even if you remove
that's
the
because
Crystal
of the
Palace
extra fixture.
Yeah. But it would still sit about 7th or 8th. They'd sit around about Manchester United on this table if you remove the Palace fixture. Wolves, Newcastle, Brighton, Chelsea, and then Manchester United. Those are the best of it for just 35 to 38. Remember, you need to think about this end of the season potentially as well. What do you notice about this?
Not many of those are in my wildcard 32 thinking necessarily.
What if I
Leeds wouldn't be. Wolves wouldn't be.
Okay.
Newcastle ain't too much.
What if I asked you to think about the context of game week 33 to the ratings of this ticker 35 to 38 and considering the teams that we're currently projecting to double in 33?
So, well, I mean, the obvious thing is there's a mismatch.
Go on.
So I suppose Arsenal in 33 don't rank very well because it's City and Newcastle potentially as a double.
It's
But
double.
but I suppose you're looking at it's an extra fixture, but it's also a blank, right? But I'm just saying that City, if it was a standalone for 33, it's City, but they look
just
really good
standalone 33.
35.
Don't worry about anything else. Just think about the context of 33 and these last four fixtures 35, 38.
Okay, well, Leeds look good in 33 and good 35
They
to
do.
38.
Wolves at home, single fixture or double.
Yeah. Wolves is the reverse in 33 is Leeds, but then they look all right.
Yeah.
Newcastle, Bournemouth at home, and then a good run in. That's all right. Chelsea, it's United, but it's a home fixture, and then their running is all right.
For those who are screaming at their monitor or screaming in their own ears, I will tell you the answer. So of these top 7 teams on my ticker 35 to 38, 5 of them are projected to double in 33.
So Arsenal, Newcastle, Brighton, Chelsea,
And Manchester City.
City. Okay.
So the only one not is Burnley. And let's be honest, that's the one you give the least shit about. You'll have Dubravka for the double, but you don't care about him afterwards, right? The point being here is, under these projections, the 33 bench boost might not look absolutely fantastic. But if you free hit in 34 afterwards, this will look quite good for the running.
Okay.
That's the K. So I think you could even if you drill into it and you go, Chelsea are at Liverpool 36, you could hide them for your Brighton players who are at home to Wolves in the same game week. Jan-Paul Van Heck will be a popular one for people, I think, as when it comes around. Bart Verbruggen, another one I've mentioned, right? So that's important because I think what will happen in 32 is if these projections happen, people go, it's not the best bench boost ever. Fine, I'm going to wildcard towards it and then bench boost 33. By the way, the next team on this list is Manchester United in 8th position here. And we're talking about holding on to Bruno Fernandes through potentially, right? If you carry the current projections into the period of 35, 38, these teams look quite good. That's my point.
Okay.
So I think it will spur people on to take that route, but you need the free hit. And under that basis, it will make so much more logical sense, I think, for the majority of people to free hit in 34 rather than 33. Because if you compare the teams that we'd looked at for 33 and 34, it's the team in 33 that would set you better for 35, 38 rather than 34 to 38. Right. So that's why I want to highlight that. There are things that can change this in terms of even the ticker, right? So we might be looking at it as Crystal Palace as like a really dark green fixture because they've just thrown in the towel in the league and they're all in the Conference League, for example. The chips. Triple captain, you've used, Suj?
I have.
Me too. There is every chance there'll be more than one double left, as shown here, with the potential for City Palace. Maybe West Ham Everton ends up in 35 rather than 34, something else. You know what? If you had Jared Bowen away to Brentford and home to Everton in 35, I wouldn't put people off. You get near 180 minutes, just do it. Yeah. Forget about it. That's the best advice I can give people. Forget about it. Because even if there is a scenario where there's not another double, there will be things at the end, like Arsenal having a party against Burnley in 37, where you can just attack something.
Yeah.
Maybe even a differential triple captain in the run, right? Forget about it. You don't need to plan for it anyway. My advice to people on the bench boost is careful not to put all your eggs into it. Don't define yourself by, I need to get 25 points on a bench boost, forgetting about the points in your team for other game weeks. 33 will be the popular route for most people. 35, as mentioned in the last Chip Strategy podcast, I think is a potential out if it looks terrible. And under a scenario where Port Vale and Southampton go through, let's not bullshit anyone. It is going to look terrible.
Yep.
So there are outs in 35. You've got fixtures like Bournemouth against Crystal Palace. People got like James Hill, stuff like that. Marcus Tavernier. Leeds host Burnley. Wolves and Sunderland play each other. Across Bournemouth, Leeds and Sunderland, or even Wolves, there are cheap enabling assets that you may have as part of your bench that you could choose. Now will be an option for many people. What I'd advise people to be is confident in the involvement of all 15 of your players. You need a particular consciousness around Chelsea and Manchester City players because they've got the tightest turnarounds and they've got it all to do in their second legs next Tuesday. I don't think either of them throw the towel into their Premier League game this weekend, but I'd be conscious certainly if I had people like Nico O'Reilly, who I'd know if he was a substitute, there's a chance he doesn't get off the bench, would be enough to put me off. For what it's worth, I think Semenyo Haaland will play. I think João Pedro will probably play for Chelsea, but I think you need an awareness subject to what assets you've got. I mean, if you're sitting there with Robert Sanchez, I don't know what's going on there. Me and David will discuss it a little bit on the weekend or tomorrow. Could it land in 32 for some people? It might. But I think it depends on the makeup of what you've got. So if you've got too much commitment to, say, Bournemouth away to Arsenal or Fulham away to Liverpool, it's obviously going to look shit. But there are some people that might have some combinations that look quite good in 32. Let's say for your James Hill, you've got Diouf, for example. Or maybe you're even still sitting there with Esteve and Dubravka and they've got an okay home fixture. Maybe you're sitting there with a cheap Brighton asset even. Maybe Van Heck's been sitting there. You're looking at Burnley away. I think there is a scenario for a small group of people that don't have heavy involvement in Bournemouth and Fulham that it might sit okay for 32 as an out if 33 looks shit. That would be another very good reason not to activate the wild card too early, potentially. 36 could look good. If it does, however, under that very unique example I gave where 6 teams could in theory double in 36, is extremely unlikely, by the way, then I think you'll just find that rotation will be more brutal than it's going to be in 33.
Okay.
You mentioned the example yourself. West Ham. Cool. Our fixture with Newcastle come forward. Right. Well, if you are safe from relegation.
If we're in the FA, and we're in the FA Cup final.
Playing
Forget about
team.
it. Playing kids all day long. Yeah.
Now, by consequence of that, you might go, well, I'm definitely having trouble Newcastle and I definitely want trouble Newcastle. I get that. But even then, the struggle of potentially nailing down the team that would play at Nottingham Forest away at the weekend, which could be a Sunday, again, if Forest are still in Europe, and then maybe playing West Ham on a Wednesday. Right, is Gordon Barnes are these players going to play twice?
Who knows?
I would strongly advise against any consideration for bench boosting game weeks 37 or 38. Strongly advise against, even if it looks good. My players look good on the bench for that week. You're going to get towards the end of the season. Something's going to happen where player X, we use this reference in terms of Harry Wilson, an example where maybe you get towards the end of the season and he's like, I'm not signing a new contract. Marco Silva goes, I ain't playing you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right now, I would find that hard to believe, but it's not inconceivable. You're going to end up forcing transfers to cover players that you're worried about won't play. And you will be better off focusing transfers at that period in attacking higher upside stuff, I would suggest. So I'd strongly against 37 or 38. Do not obsess about this bench boost. Ultimately, it will be the difference between a good captain and a bad captain. And that's if it's good.
Okay.
You've just seen examples like a week just gone, Haaland blanks, Fernandes and Ekateke do quite well. It's a jump.
Massive. Yep.
Yeah. That's the sort of jump you would want off your bench boost. Don't over obsess about this. It's not that deep. Wild card. Most are obviously going to go 32 to bench boost 33, free hit 34. Based on what I've looked at in terms of the fixture difficulty 35 to 38, if the projections land as they currently are, I think it'll be very popular. You could pivot to 33 if you don't like it. If it turns out shit, free hit 34, maybe the out is the bench boost 35. For some people, wildcarding 34 after a den and the 33 will work. For those who have used a free hit, it may for many of you be the only real way out is the wildcard 34. It could be too difficult to manage both. There is, of course, a scenario where we end up with 8 fixtures or so in 34 and it becomes maybe not too difficult to manage. That's the sort of thing that you're hoping for. 35 might be the one for me, possibly even, to attack at the end. I think on what I've looked at, the most likely for me, based on the current projections, would be wildcard 33, free hit 34. Obviously, I don't have the bench boost left personally. So for me, just doing it on 33 would make more sense. But I'm very prepared to move that if results change and projections change. But some people doing it 35 afterwards, after dead end into one of 33 or 34 and free hit in the other. If you end up with a split here, where let's say, for example, maybe Brighton Chelsea does get held back and stays in 34 rather than being brought forward to 33, you might be in a scenario of splitting and saying, actually, the team I really want only comes together in 35. Maybe. Free hit is 33 versus 34. The decision ultimately probably comes down to what's easier to manage rather than what's best. I don't think right now anyone could say with 100% certainty which way they'll go. You might think you know, but if shit hits the fan, it might be a different way to go.
Okay.
I would say right now, for me, free hit 34 would be more likely, but that could definitely change. And it's only because I think the team would carry better from 33 rather than the team that would carry from 34.
I think I'm still on the same game plan, to be honest with you, which is wildcard 32, bench boost 33, free hit 34, running 35. I think the strategy for me hasn't changed from what I'm seeing. It's maybe the expectation of what I'm going to get from the bench boost is the only thing that you've made me think, all right, it might not be as crazy. In fact, I might even take a couple more punts on the bench just for the hell of it. That's the way I'm going to see out the season. But yeah, okay. And I think for a lot of people, it might be in a similar boat.
Couple of FAQs. I've used my wild card. How do I manage this? The best advice I give to people at the moment is by only doing what you have to do. Transfers are very tempting at the moment, but probably better off being held because at this stage of the season, information is king. Let's give you an example. I'm seeing lots of talk about this. Haaland to João Pedro as an example, or moving Haaland out to Salah. Don't disagree with these ideas. He's not been great for a number of weeks. I would say on the next 3 weeks, he's not even the best captain for any of the next 3 weeks. In my view at the moment, it's Ekitike, then Wilson, then Fernandes over the next 3 weeks. There's every reason to take him on. But what happens under a circumstance where then suddenly Palace go out next Thursday in the Conference League? Let's say they win 2-0 tonight, but then they cock it up next week and lose 2-0 and lose on penalties. And you've made that transfer and then it's announced that Haaland's going to double in 32. What are you going to do? That's unlikely, but it's not something that is impossible. People shouldn't necessarily play the game with fear, but they should play the game with an awareness.
Yeah.
I don't think there's enough gain on those sort of moves this week, personally, without some additional information. People don't have a free hit. I think it depends what you have and how it lands. Ultimately, we forget this, but a single game week player can beat a doubler. How many times have you seen the team of the week at the end of a double game week and it's had 11 doublers?
Never.
There's someone in there who'll score like 15, 16 points with a single or something, right? But a blanker will almost certainly not outscore a player with a fixture unless, of course, it's a Tottenham centre back. So they might well get sent off, right?
Very true.
So it may well be that it's wildcard 34. You run to 33 and just wildcard 34 and make the best of what's left. That decision doesn't need to be made now. Again, I strongly recommend that if people are not sure what to do, rolling transfers is probably a smart play. If you've got something that needs dealing with, then obviously deal with it. But if it's just, I think this player might outscore this player this week, in most scenarios, I think leave it be, guys.
Okay.
That's it.
Alrighty, James, we can also cover off some questions that we've had in on Twitter, though we have been pretty comprehensive. I did such a good job. I was well organized. I put them up on my screen.
And now I've lost them.
No, I've got them back. Here we go. I have to click on your icon. So most of the kind of questions we have given opinions on, it is very difficult to give people an answer when you don't know their specific team. But let's see if we can help some people.
Sure.
So FPL Pasty, Cornish, I hope. So if your wildcard is gone and you've only got one or two free transfers, what's the most sensible option? What you've just said there, I guess, is exactly that.
I mean, if your team's a fire and you're like, if you're sitting there and you're like, I really want to get Ekateke this week and the forward I've got is shite for whatever reason, but would I go like Thiago to Ekateke this week? Oh, I'm really worried what he's going to do against Tottenham. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
FPL Blue Lion, I initially thought he was talking about the Champions League fantasy, James, because he said he's thinking of swapping out Haaland for Pedri this week, as it seems a good option with the extra game.
Pedro, yeah.
Until I did realise that I was, firstly, why are you swapping a midfielder for a striker? And then I understand that he actually means Pedro. I mean, that's a given. It's everybody's talking about that potential transfer as being one that could be good, right?
Yeah, it's going to be quite popular. Is João Pedro more likely to play this Saturday than Haaland? I don't even know the answer to that, honestly. They've both got shit turnarounds. Obviously, look, João Pedro is going to have a fixture in 31 and Haaland almost certainly isn't. They then play each other in 32. Is the actual gain here just João Pedro having an extra fixture in 31? Like I said, what then happens under a scenario where Palace cock it up next week? Could that fixture go into 32? I just think that sort of move for me would be better off leaving it till next week. And at least then you could say, oh, I know Palace have gone through. They definitely won't double in 32. I could wait an extra week.
Okay. Harry Trimble is this is not really so much a question, but more he's on the Wildcard 33 Free Hit 34 Bench Boost 35, which we've kind of signposted as the get out of jail free if the double game week 33 looks toilet and you don't want a wildcard in 32, kick it forward a week and you could do a wildcard 33 Free Hit 34 Bench Boost 35 possibly.
Yeah, I mean I don't love it. It's just an out.
An out, exactly that. Yeah. Jack wants to know that he's looking forward to listening and he hopes for some clarity. His question is, which team out of Brentford or Liverpool is more likely to double, if at all? He's thinking who to sell and buy back Haaland in 32. So I think in his mind, is he thinking about going to either Thiago or Ekatike and coming back to Haaland based on that question?
Brentford can't double now this season. Unless something weird like Weber circumstance happens.
Yep. William Hansen, who would you say is the best captain for game week 31? I think most people will default to Bruno, but it seems like a good week to go for somebody else.
It depends on his fitness, but my intention would be to captain Harry Wilson as it stands.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah, I haven't given it much thought as it stands yet. I've got your fixture, especially Burnley at home, right, for Fulham?
Yeah. It's not that I think most people will probably default to Bruno Fernandes away to Bournemouth, and that's absolutely fine. It's this and Bruno any game. But for me, my intention, he needs to be fit. Like he probably needs to be involved at least this weekend for me to feel confident about it. If he starts at Forest and comes through the game fine, I'm pretty confident I would captain Harry Wilson in 31.
I'm going to go Morgan. I'm going to buy and captain Morgan Gibbs-White in game week 31.
I don't blame you.
Dag Ingestenhaug says, nobody's talking about bench boost game week 32. My bench that week will be Dubravka, Maguire, Alderete and Declan Rice, all home fixtures. He'll free hit in 33. And then he needs to get to one transfer for game week 34 and wildcard 35.
So as said, if you haven't got any kind of real coverage of, say, particularly Bournemouth Fulham, you might land in a scenario where 32 looks okay. I would certainly question the validity of Declan Rice being your worst attacking player when he's at home to Bournemouth. I'd question that personally, but might be that he's got amazing squad depth. If that's the case, then yeah, it's fine.
Let's give the last question of the show to Ian Parron, Mr. Cloud, Sky FF show. Check him out. Looking a little further ahead, do you expect Sky to select Palace for the Friday or Monday in Game Week 35 or 36? Or have they already done enough gerrymandering of the fixtures with their choice of Palace West Ham on the Monday to manipulate the fixtures to their needs?
Do not rule it out. As we said, don't rule out Brentford v West Ham as the example we've given, or I think what Ian's using there is like Bournemouth versus Crystal Palace being a Friday night game in 35 that would block 34 and maybe force it into another week. Don't rule them out of going, hey, we're going to do something like, I tell you what, we'll go Palace versus Everton on the Friday night in 36, and we'll go West Ham, Brentford versus West Ham on a Friday night 35, just to like even block both of them. I don't rule that sort of thing out, not at all. But I think if they did that sort of thing and they tried to be, well, we're going to really try and force this into 37, for example, I think at that point, the Premier League would probably go, no, actually, we're going to move Palace West Ham back because we have to. So I think it could even backfire. But yeah, I think the one thing I just repeat for people is it's highly likely that the Premier League will want a Tuesday and a Wednesday game in 33. Highly likely. And they will want Palace West Ham to stay on the Monday. So under a very unique circumstance where, say, all the English teams went out the Champions League, then I still think we'd have two fixtures brought forward. I don't think I'll just leave them in 34. That's open for Sky to have a couple of fixtures in there. So under that circumstance, I think it's so likely that Brighton, Chelsea and Arsenal, Newcastle will come forward because those would be the obvious ones. Or obviously even not, fine, maybe City Palace does go in there instead, right? So I do think that it's probably going to, I don't want to say minimum, but it would be a real surprise to me if we didn't have at least 4 teams doubling in 33.
Okay.
As was the case last year.
Cool. James, that's a wrap on this episode of Chip Talk. Will we squeeze in another one before the end of the season? We probably will do one more, will we?
I imagine we probably will want to revisit this, yes, after the FA Cup quarterfinals. I don't want to say when that week yet, but yeah, ahead of the 32 deadline, I think we'll probably need to, because also there'll be people who are, it's like, oh yeah, okay, popular template is like Wildcard 32, Bench Boost 33, but I want to give some time for the people like, right, I've got a real problem now. I don't have a free hit. What am I doing? And stuff like that. So I think we need to look at avenues for those people. It probably become clear in terms of triple captaincy. We might even end up with something that's like a debate of like Bowen 35 versus Haaland 36, for example. It's not impossible. So yeah, we'll come back to it again.
Okie dokie. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you share the pod if you think that your mini league rivals are not listening, because obviously you want an advantage on them with all of your chips that you got left up your sleeve.
Did you just advise people not to share the podcast?
Not with their mini league rivals.
What you did.
Not their mini league rivals. My 8-year-old nephew, mate, who's beating me by 12 points. You think I'm going to tell him to listen? No. Actually, to be fair, he's already spunked all his chips, so it makes no difference to him.
Why are you a bully? Is it not hard enough for this kid that he supports Tottenham? Honestly,
it's bad. I feel for him. I tried to phone him on Tuesday night about 9 o'clock, and I was debating, is it past his bedtime or not? Or do I need to rub salt in the poor kid's wounds? Share the podcast, share the love. You never know. Everybody's got different teams. Most importantly, it's a crazy world out there right now. Look after yourselves, people. Stay as safe as you can. And we'll be back at you. Differential show tomorrow for the Patreons. What's Weekender tomorrow?
I finally plugged Patreon. I was like, I'm going to have to do it.
Patreon.com/Planet FPL. The fixture planning spreadsheet that you can see, the kind of Skittles spreadsheet, as I call it, because it's the color of the rainbow, is available from basic tier upwards, which also gets you access to basic plus tier upwards, which also gets you into our Slack community where there's hundreds of other very engaged fantasy managers. You've got prize leagues. You've got additional content each and every day of the week. Shout out to Nico and Oni for their podcast on racism in football yesterday, which is a great listen for our patrons. And we tackle not just fantasy related subjects. We've got money in football. We've got Tottenham, which is kind of our version of therapy and all
Posted
sorts
this
of other
morning.
stuff going on.
Posted this
So come and join us on Patreon. It's a whole lot of fun, and we'd love to have you there. If not, just give the show a thumbs up and a nice little 5-star review. Tomorrow, the weekender, you can preview Liverpool v Tottenham with your Friday partner in crime, David. And back next week. Stay safe, look after yourselves.
I don't need to preview it. I can just tell you what's going to happen.
We can. And it's a horror movie. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other and always play it your way. Good luck. Cue music, please, man child.